Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another one of our essentially bi-weekly training webinars that we do here for Goalline. Today is going to be about registration for players and coaches. We'll kind of see how, regardless of what type of person you're registering, the process to create the forms is going to be the same here. Little bit of housekeeping as we get started and just wait for some more folks to get themselves connected. You'll find that you don't have any audio options to speak throughout the webinar, but there is a chat. So if you do have any questions and you'd like to ask those throughout the webinar, go ahead and throw your question into the chat, and I do take a look at those. And if it's something that I can address right away, I will. Or if it's something that will come to later on in the webinar, then I'll try to let you know that as well. And as always, this webinar is being recorded. So as soon as it's over, you will receive an email providing you with a copy of the webinar. But we also put these webinars generally up on our Goalline YouTube channel. So if you or someone else from your organization wants to take another look at this webinar, feel free to check out our YouTube channel for all kinds of different webinars on all the different topics that we've been doing over the last few years. So without further ado, today is registration. So I have a demo site up here in front of us, and we're going to use this demo site to start creating a registration form for players and one for coaches. We're going to talk about how we create them, how you edit them, as well as how you would archive them when you no longer need a specific form. And then we'll look at the pretty simple 5-step process for how you manage and create that form and get all of the criteria that you need. You're going to start by logging into your site using the login in the upper right-hand corner. Upper right-hand corner. No matter what style of site you have, that is always where your administrative login is going to be. When you log in, you're going to be brought to your Goalline control panel, and it should look just like this. You may have a section of favorites above the people section, but that's something that you are able to update on your own personal user profile. That doesn't apply to anybody else. Favorites are just for you. So what I have here is my people section right on top, and this is where I'm going to get started. Most of what I need to do related to registration is all going to be found right in this section. So this is where I'm going to go to create an individual registration form. When we refer to individual registration forms, we're really just differentiating between a form that's going to be used by a player or a coach versus a team that is going to be registering. Team registration forms are for entire teams, complete with potentially rosters and all their coaching information to register into a tournament or into a league. You would not have individual players going through the team registration process. So we're going to click on the tile that says individual registration forms. And when you have access to registration, what you should see is something that looks like this, with the option of creating a new form, and any forms you may already have are going to be listed here. So right now I have an unpublished form called 2022 player registration. We're going to be going in and editing this form. If I ever want to edit a form, I come here to edit it. I can view it. Because it's unpublished, when I view the form using this button, it's not going to allow me to view the form, but we'll find a way that we can preview a form before it's published when we get into the editing process. If it is ready to publish, I can click the publish button from here. We'll click on this here, and it's going to tell us there's all kinds of reasons why I can't publish my form. So I'm not going to do that right away. We will take a look at the requirements and do that shortly. And then here's my option for copying and archiving. To copy a form, like when I click this button to copy a form, I just select the copy option from this dropdown, but there are some additional options. It's possible that I can be all done with this form for maybe this is last year's form, and I want to create a copy so that I can get it ready for this year, but I don't want to see this form in my list anymore. I can choose the copy and archive option, or I can simply just archive it and get it out of my list altogether. The permanently delete option is exactly as it sounds. It permanently deletes the form and all data related to the form. So it's really important not to use this function if you actually have registrations that are not just test registrations on that form. Whether you archive a form or not, it will always be something you can report on unless you've selected the option to permanently delete it. When I'm selecting the copy option, the first thing it wants me to do is give it a new name. So by default, it's just going to add the word copy to the end of it. But you can go right ahead and start changing that to the appropriate year and remove the word copy so that it's just named appropriately to get going. When I select the copy and archive, I still get to call my new form whatever I want, but then I'm also able to relabel the way that the archived form is going to appear when I go to do registration searches. One of my recommendations is to always include some really pertinent information in the title of the form. Player registration, pretty obvious, but using the year or the calendar year or the season reference in your form name sometimes can be helpful. You can, though, just use a form name called player registration, and then when you go to archive it, you would add that 2022 so that you know that when you're looking back at historical data, the one from last year is going to be labeled from last year, and so on and so on. So you have these options here as you use that copy and archive function. To create a brand new form that you're starting just from scratch, you would just enter a new form name. I don't have a coach form yet, so I'm going to select to create a coach registration form. And I like the convention of using 2022. I'm going to call it coach registration. Nice and simple, easy to find. There's no confusion. And then what I have here is a bunch of form types. So we have a lot of different person types in the Goalline platform that you can register as individuals. So players are individuals, coaches, volunteers, registrants, which are kind of none of the above, and then club registration, which is something that a provincial body might use to have clubs submit their club information just to be in good standing with you as a provincial organization. So I'm going to select coach here because that's the type of person that I want to use this form, and I click the button to create the form. It's just asking if I want to confirm that yes, I do want to start working on that new form. When I start that form, it's going to take me to the 5-step editing process. And whether it's for players, coaches, referees, whatever you have, it is always the same 5-step process. So the first step is a little bit of your basic form information, some of the general information about the form, and then it's about the actual information that you're collecting about the participant. And in this case, we're talking about coaches. So when we're going through this first step, it's to make sure that the form is going to behave the way that we want. So again, we can adjust our title here. If I haven't used the form yet, I'm able to change the person type. If I accidentally set it to coach when I meant player, I can change that here up until the point that someone uses it. Goalline also has some pretty robust membership functionality. Memberships are typically designed to charge an additional fee over and above the program fees that you'll be setting up for yourself. And it's a great way to make sure that, for example, your governing body or your region or a third party is going to be able to receive membership funds while folks are registering. There is a great FAQ article. FAQ.goalline.ca is a great resource. We are looking to update our new support center, but the Goalline FAQ here at faq.goalline.ca, if you look up the membership functionality there, you'll find that there's a lot of really useful ways to use the membership stuff. In this webinar, we're not going to be covering it too much more, but it is mentioned here, so I didn't want to just breeze past it and pretend it wasn't there. The next thing we see here is that we have our registration closing date. This is always going to default to be 1 year from the date you created the form. So right now it's October 31st. So this is by default going to be available until 2023, October 31st. It's probably not a good closing date. I probably want my registrants to be done registering long before that. So I can adjust this to be whatever I want. So if I want to bring that back and have the form actually close on December 16th, sounds like a nice day. So we'll pick December 16th here, and that way the form is going to close and no one can register on December 17th. You'll be able to register on the 16th, but not on the 17th. If you display the form in your menu, this is going to be using our standard menu settings. It's going to work in conjunction with the setting of placing registration forms into your menu, either in the top menu first row or second row. If you do have a gold layout site, you may not be able to place it in the top menu second row. I'll just show you an example of a gold layout site. If you have been to one of my webinars, you've definitely seen this demo site before. So the gold layout is it's got a menu that goes across the top, but you'll find that when you go to manage the items in your menu, that there's just a couple slight differences between this layout and what we call the silver layout, which is the example that we're looking at here. If you want it to be placed in your menu, you can do that. You can also use the link. The URL that's going to be created from your published form is a unique URL that you can use to link from anywhere else. A lot of folks will create a web page, have lots of information on it for folks to read before they start registering, and then have a link to that form from the bottom of that web page. Entirely up to you how you go about that. The next question here, this is one of the most important questions to set correctly from the beginning, and I don't have it set correctly right now. So what happens here is it says enable, require, or restrict returning registrants from the Goalline database. This is referring to your Goalline database. So your system, your Goalline site, what players, what coaches are already in your system. The ability to restrict or require it is essentially saying, can you register if you've never registered here before? And and it's either a yes or a no. The yes option here is the happy medium. This is going to allow new people and returning people to register with this form. If I say that it's required, what that means is you can only register if you are already in my system, if you have already registered with me in the past in this system. If I say no, it's the opposite. Only people who are brand new to my organization are going to be able to register. And it may seem a little bit silly to have these options, but there are some really great use cases of why you might use either the no option or the required. But unless those scenarios apply, you should always select yes here. And so the scenarios that would apply, that would make it make sense for you to use the required option, I often use the select team tryout information. A lot of organizations might have a special team within their club that players are going to go through a special tryout process, and they're only going to register to actually pay the fees for that team if they have passed the tryouts and been invited. So in that case, using the required option will eliminate anybody who's not already in your system from being able to register. We'll talk about another layer of how you can restrict people from registering against a form that you don't want them to register on. But that is one use case here. A use case for using the no option is if your organization is trying to increase your participation and kind of growing your player base or your coach base, you may have a separate form that offers very specific special pricing or asks for very specific information about participants because they're new, that a participant who's already in your system might not have to go through. So there's lots of use cases here for using one or the other, but using the yes option is going to allow people who are already in your system and new people to register on this form. The collapsible person section, I'm not a fan of using the collapsible person section here. So I'm going to say no to that. But really all this does is if you are collecting player information, parent 1 and parent 2 information, it just collapses the section so that the screen doesn't look so long as you're filling out that first step. I don't like using it because in my experience, I've done this myself where I try to continue when there's actually required information in some of those collapsed sections. So my preference is to not have that collapsed so that there's no chance of somebody thinking they can proceed when they haven't actually completed all the information yet. If you want to start taking wait lists, if this form is something where there is limited capacity and you want to start taking wait lists, you do want to set this to yes here on the step 1, and then you'll be able to use some settings in the program section as we move on to the next step on how you actually enable those restrictions. And then registrants being spares. So the spares system is something that's typically only used by adult recreational organizations, and it's used in conjunction with our team attendance tools. Essentially, if a person is registering as a spare, they're going to be listed with a position that when teams don't have enough players to field a team for a game, they will be able to select from a list of spares and invite them to a specific game. Generally, like I said, this is only used for a lot of adult recreational organizations, so you likely won't ever really use that unless that applies to you. Team registration configuration. What this does is it allows you to say that the players or coaches who are registering on this form are allowed to actually select their team as they register. So it would give them a selection of divisions. They would pick the division, and then from there, the list of available teams is going to show, and they would select their team. When using this feature, by the time they finish registering, not only have they registered, but they'll also be immediately automatically assigned to the team that they selected. This can be set to yes as optional, or it can be set to yes as required, which means you cannot proceed past step one without selecting the division and team that you're going to be participating on. If you don't have if you don't want players to be selecting or coaches to be selecting their own team, just leave this to no, and the whole section will not appear on the form. Priority registration is the feature that works kind of in conjunction with the restriction above that we were talking about. And this allows you to make sure that only specific people are going to be able to register. There's a few different ways that you can implement priority registration. Registering in a specific event is going to refer to your past registrations. In my system right now, I don't have any past registrations that would actually work for me to use priority registration, but that doesn't mean that I can't still use it. What I would do is I would enter a priority registration code. So if I'm going to say that, code 2022 is the priority registration code that is effective, people who have this code can start registering tomorrow. But people who don't have that code can't start registering until some other time later on. Let's say we'll give those priority folks a week, and then on the 7th of November, it will be open to the general public. I don't actually have to open this to the general public at all. I can leave it so that only priority registration would apply. I can also stagger it so that this specific set of priority registrations can register before another group may be allowed to go. So this might be, code 2 for 2022 might be another layer of priority registration, and those folks can start registering, let's say, on Friday. So this is a way for you to allow players who fit certain criteria to register with you before the general public does, or only with invitation. So again, those invitation only tryout events, or a team that they're allowed to register for because they've already accomplished their tryouts. Closing your registration here, your closing date that we selected above is going to apply unless you also add a date here. The date here, whichever date is soonest, the form will close. So I have my form set to close on December 16th. If I was to set this closing date to December 30th, it's still going to close on December 16th because that's the earliest date. So just keep that in mind, that your close date is going to be both the expiration date of the form and the close date set here, whichever comes first. As we scroll down, we can see, actually, I'm going to get rid of these before we preview because I won't be able to do a test registration when we're all set here. As we scroll down, then we get into the participant information. So in this case, we're dealing with coach information. First name, last name, date of birth, and email address are always going to be required by the Goalline system. These are the fields that we use to differentiate duplicates and make sure that we don't, differentiate individuals and not create duplicates. These credentials are also used to do things like retrieving access codes for people who are trying to access their registration account or registering as a returning participant. Goalline does have shopping cart features, and if you're already using shopping cart features, the access code part of what I just said might not really apply too much. But if you are using sort of the traditional Goalline registration and have not moved to shopping cart yet, the access code is something that applies when a registrant is coming as a returning registrant. The way we identify them and allow them to proceed is based on their first name, last name, date of birth, and email address, along with their access code that they can retrieve at any time. You'll find that you can set any of the other pieces of information here as collected. Green means collected but optional. Yellow means collected and required. Red means no, we're not even asking for that. It's not even going to show up on the form. So we'll always be requiring these 4 first pieces, but you probably want a bunch of other information as well. So if you have to collect things like gender information, if you do have age and gender restrictions on the programs that people can register for, you do need to require the gender questions so that we'll know whether or not we can allow them to select specific programs. But you'll see there's all kinds of basic information that's just kind of standard standard across all of the different kinds of profiles that exist. If there's ever a question that you want to ask that's not already listed here, you can go ahead and create your own additional questions. I'm going to use my usual example of, do you have any allergies? So asking an additional question can be done in various ways. If I'm going to ask you if you have any allergies, really what I want is a yes or no answer. So I'm going to use a radio button option here, but you'll see that I can also choose a drop down. I can have text box or text area, and then I can have multiple choice. Obviously for this question, the two options that make the most sense are radio button and drop down. I like radio button for yes or no. And now I put my options. So one option is going to be to say yes, and one option is going to be to say no. I want this question to be required, so I'm going to actually say yes in the required section here. And because it's required, I know now that they're not going to be able to proceed with registering without answering this question. Office only is a setting that you cannot use in conjunction with it being required, but this is an example for an office only question is oftentimes like age verification, like have you physically seen a birth certificate for this person, or has their NCCP qualification been validated, and things like that. So there's some office only questions that the idea there is you want it to be associated with the 2022 registration, but you don't want the participant to be the one that answers the question. You want this to be answered by an administrator who's editing the profile of the participant. I'm going to go and save my changes now because there's a setting, a feature that you can use to create questions that are only required if you said you answered other questions a certain way. So I'm just going to scroll right back to where we were. So now I have my allergies question. I'm going to set that to be question number 1, and then we're going to add a second question. I want to know what your allergies are. So what are your allergies? And I want this to be a text box because I want you to type it in, and I want it to be required. But I only want it to be required for the people who said that, yes, they have allergies. So what I can do here is it asks me, do I want to require this based on another field? So yes, I do. And the field is called allergies because that's the question. And I can choose now which answer that it's required based on. So it's required if you answered the allergies question as yes. But if you said no, it is not going to be required. So you won't even see the what are your allergies question if you don't have any allergies. You can add additional descriptions to any of your questions. And as I mentioned, you can select a bunch of different ways to ask your question. Checkbox is one that does allow multiple choices. A great example of checkbox is going to be things like, what are you interested in volunteering for? Are you interested in volunteering? If so, check all that applies as far as kind of the roles that you might have available, and they can check off some or all of them. When you go to report on that information, you're going to see all of the answers that they provided. I'm going to scroll down past this. So, well, actually, let's talk about it. So, when you are using this for players, you want to also collect player or parent and guardian information. Over here, it looks like I haven't given my parent or guardian section a label. And the reason that we allow you to create your own label is because all kinds of organizations want it to be labeled differently. I'm going to go to the website section over here, and I'm going to go to site configuration. And I'm going to find in here, there's going to be a setting for me to put the label in for parent section title. Because sometimes people do want it to be parents or emergency contact. But parent/guardian is a pretty common one. So we'll go ahead. I'll just use the same one I use a lot. So I'm going to call it parent/guardian. And we'll see that now that I have that parent/guardian selected, when we are looking at the registration form on step 1, oh, I didn't save my question and I just refreshed that. But that's okay. We can add it back really quick. So now we're going to see that that section, instead of it not having a label, it is going to have a label down here for parent/guardian information collected. And it's going to update the terminology used for all of this. And just for inclusivity, it's important not to alienate folks by saying, you know, what's your mom's name and what's your dad's name? Just making sure that you're making it easy for for folks to register. Oftentimes with youth organizations, you're going to want that parent first name, last name, and email address to be required. I do also recommend that you set the date of birth as required. This allows the parent to have their own unique profile with their own unique access code, which allows them to just do a little bit more as far as controlling the account when it comes to their youth participant. You can ask for a bunch of other information. A nice little addition is if you are asking for address information and you're asking it of the player or the coach above as well, what you'll find is the registrant will have the option to just say same as above. So they don't actually have to type it in twice, even though you can ask for it more than once. You can ask extra questions to those parents anytime. And then when it comes to the second parent or guardian information, my recommendation is just collect the same information, but set that to be optional in case there is a situation where there's not a two-parent household. When we get to the bottom here, we can see there's a little bit we can do with attachments. So you can upload documents that are to be downloaded by the registrant, and you can also ask the registrant to upload documents to the system. And this can be set as optional, or it can be set as required. In order for the registrants to download documents, you do have to upload those. So I have one file in here. So I have a new file available here, or no, that's just asking me to update a new file because I don't have any files for people to download yet. So I would upload a file here, and that way when folks are registering, they're going to be able to download it. Just going to add back my allergy question really quick. That's not how you spell that at all. Go. Text box, and yes, it's required based on this, and it's required if you said yes. All right. So that's what our first step is going to look like, and whether it's for players or coaches or officials, that general settings for your form and the information you're collecting about the participant themselves, that's going to be all the same. With all the different participants. The rest of the steps, again, very, very easy to follow and kind of consistent here. The programs and payment types are the actual items that people are registering for. This is where we generally are going to see a program representing every age, skill, and gender that you offer. So if we have U7 boys and we also have U7 girls, I'm going to add my U7 boys. When I add a U7 boys program, I can then choose what that payment details line is going to say. So this is going to be 2022 season. I can set up that restriction for age and gender. So if this is only for boys, I would make sure that I select the male option. And if I want to make sure that all the players are the appropriate age, I'm going to select the appropriate birth year range that applies to this age category. If there is a maximum number that you can accept for this program, which typically your initial season registration doesn't have a restriction, but think about coaching clinics, referee clinics, camp days, things like that, that may have a maximum number of participants. So if there was a maximum of 20, I can put that maximum here. And then I can say after 20, let's automatically compile a wait list. If I don't set the wait list option after 20, people will just see that the program is full and they cannot register. I'm going to put in the cost of the program here. So let's say this costs $100. If I charge taxes, I can set my tax information here. If I have a general ledger code that I want to use, so maybe like U7B 2022 is a general ledger code that I want to use. That way, when I do my transaction report later, everyone who registered for this program, it's going to show up with this general ledger code. Makes it easy to export your transaction report and import it into your accounting program. For the most part, generally we see that folks like to set their payments required at the time of registration by online payment. But if you do have offline payment like cash or check options, you want to set the due date for which they need to make that payment. There are ways for you to set up payment plans. That goes through our support team. So what you would do is send us what's the program title, what's the initial deposit they have to pay when they register, and what are the monthly payments that they're going to be agreeing to after the fact. Our support team would set those up for you, and that would include all of those registration due dates. Due dates also trigger upcoming payment notifications and missed payment notifications to both the registrant and the person indicated as the registrar on your confirmation message. So we're going to save our changes here. And I would move on and continue creating the programs that I need. So we mentioned if I have U7 girls, I would also put U7 girls as a separate program because that's going to have a different gender restriction. And I typically recommend, depending on the structure of your sport and your organization, that when the prices are drastically different, that you just set up those different programs. I've seen a lot of registration forms where folks might have like 20 or 30 different program options, but when you use the age and gender restrictions, registrants are only ever going to see what they're actually allowed to register for, and they're able to look through and see that there's a house league option and a B option and an A option. When it comes to adding more options to what people are registering for, I'll just finish creating this one here. That'll be $100 as well. Um, they're going to be selecting a program. You may also want them to select a product. I recommend using products to add a tryout fee to a registration as opposed to having it built in as a program. One of the great things with Goalline's products that you can add to your registration forms is with our new style of products, you can add attributes. So instead of just saying pay for the tryout fee, you can have them select the tryout fee and indicate what group they're trying out with, which just helps your reporting a little bit better. There's a great product summary that would show you a nice little breakdown of how many people are in each of those product categories. I'm going to click add or remove products. I don't have any available here. So I'm going to go back out to my website section and we're going to go to our commerce here and I can see add, edit, delete products and discounts. So I'm going to create a product and a tryout fee. I think is a good example here. Tryout fee, fee for trying out. You don't have to put a description. The tryout fee is going to be $150. And it's not a discount, but if I was creating a discount, I would start by checking that. The default quantity is one because I don't want you to pay more than one tryout fee. And the type of the way you're going to select it is by using a checkbox. So another option is to use number input. That's great for things like, how many boxes of chocolate do you want to buy? But if it's something where I just want the registrant to check a box to select one, I want the default quantity to be one and the question style to be a checkbox. If there is a limit per family, you can enter a limit per family. A limit per registration can also be set. But the way that we're creating this product, I can only register and pay for it once anyway. Limit per family might not be a great option for a tryout fee, but it is a great option for something like a volunteer bond or a volunteer fee. If you require families to only pay a volunteer bond once, even if they have more than one child registering on that form, using limit per family, even if you set the product as mandatory, will not be charged to them when they register a second participant. You can charge taxes and add a general ledger code here as well. And when you are using online payment, you can actually set your product payment gateway to be different than the one that's on the form. So if the tryout fee goes to a different bank account than the player registration fee, you can set it up appropriately. Otherwise, everything goes into the same bank account through the same merchant account as the registration form. And here's where we see the attributes. So what group are we, going to be trying out for? So the name of this attribute is going to be the age category, and it's going to be, we'll add U7, and then we'll add U9. Let's might as well add a U11 here as well. So we'll add a U11. So those are the three options that we have. I can actually add an additional attribute if I need to. So if I wanted them to select both age and gender, I could do that. This also applies great for things like merchandise and clothing. So do I want a hoodie? What color do I want? What size do I want? Do I want a hat? Do I want a trucker hat or a baseball hat? And what color and what size? So you can have multiple attributes for the products that you create. So we are going to create this product here now. So now that that product is there, I might need to refresh my step 2 here before that shows up for me. There we go. Sorry, not sure why that. Let's see here. Product has been added. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Not sure what happened there. There we go. Okay. So now I want to add my products. So I just click add remove products, and any products that were already here are going to show up. So I'm going to check off that yes, I want the tryout fee to be added as a product. When it comes to mandatory products, which I mentioned a little bit as we've been talking here, I'm going to select the product options here. And there I can do a couple of things when it comes to products on individual registration forms. The first thing I can do is set it as mandatory, meaning if you registered, you have to buy this product. I can say that it's mandatory for everything, or I can say that it's just mandatory for a specific program. So this is a great way to break it down so that you can make it an optional fee for someone who maybe doesn't have it required as part of their program, but for anybody who is signing up for a competitive program, they would have no choice but to select the tryout fee. So all of your programs will break down to be your reporting power, but they also are able to, you're able to associate these mandatory products with the appropriate programs so that people are registering properly right from the get-go and not having to come and pay a tryout fee later, or having purchased it without realizing that they didn't need to. The other thing we can see here is the timing and late fee options. So you can hide until and hide after. The obvious example here is the late fee. So if you say that after November 30th, you're going to be charged an additional $30 to register, I would create a late fee product that costs $30 and I would hide it until until December 1st. If it's a product that is only available to purchase until the end of November, I would say that it's going to be hidden after November 30th. So we'll save that change there to make that required for that one program, and we'll see how that behaves when we look at the public side here. Discounts work exactly the same way as products. I don't have a discount created here yet, but it works exactly the same way. So things like sibling discounts, early bird discounts, things like that, you create those discounts in your product or discount section. You say that it is a discount, and you would set it as either a dollar or a percentage amount. So we're going to save and move on to step 3. It gets pretty quick from here. So moving on to step 3 is our policies. Policies are required. You absolutely must include a waiver, privacy policy, refund policy, and contact information. The CASL message is optional. I think everyone here is Canadian today, but CASL stands for Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation. The Goalline platform is fully CASL compliant, and we provide you the tools to be CASL compliant as well. The CASL message is really just an additional waiver section for you to make sure that you're giving people the information they need to trust the email that's going to be coming to them from the system. Email is going to be the primary method of communication. And because we are in Canada, the opt-in cannot be done by default. And so the registrant is going to need to check that box, and you want to just encourage them to do that. Even if they don't opt into receiving your emails, they will still receive transactional emails such as the registration confirmation or receipts that are sent specifically from the system, and access code retrievals. As far as the rest of the information that's required here, you do have to put information here. It does not have to be your entire waiver and privacy policy language written out. It is perfectly fine to make this a link to an existing resource where that information is already online. But if you do write in your actual content, so if you have waiver paragraphs that are pretty, standard, you might want to add some consent options throughout those. So wherever you want a consent checkbox to be required within the policies, you can add this macro here of consent. So I'm going to paste that in here. And I'm also going to add a little sentence. If I don't add any content next to this, it's just going to be a floating checkbox that might not look like they have to check it. So check here to agree to this paragraph. And you can put as many of these as you'd like throughout all of your policy information. You can also add your overall consent option at the bottom. So the default here is that there is no additional consent, but chances are you want consent. And either the checkbox option, which is just the typical click here to agree. And then the other option here is name input. When you use name input, you can actually validate this based on the name of the participant or one of the parents or guardians. In this case, I'm doing a coach registration form, so I can only choose the coach name. So what happens here is they're going to enter their first name and last name on step 1. They're going to pick their program on step 2. Now they're going to review their waivers and policy information and consent, and they're going to enter their name the same way as they put it on step 1 in order to proceed to the actual payment step. You also have the option over here to add, I'm going to take that out just because I have trouble with that with demo sites. And then you have the option here to add your own opt-in message. So again, just a way to encourage people to opt in to receiving your email. So we'll save our policies. We'll move on to step 4. Step 4 is a super quick step. Oh, look at that. So as you go through your registration process, you'll find that Goalline is going to help you out and make sure that you don't forget things. So I can save this, and it did save the information, but I'm not going to be able to publish it because I don't have some of my policy information. So I am just going to cheat and paste in some information here so that there's something in those boxes. And now we'll save, just because I want to be able to publish it quickly. All right, so now we'll move on to step 4. Step 4 is just the only thing I do here is tell the system how can people pay. Because I'm using a demo site, I don't have an online payment gateway, but this is where you would find your StackPay merchant account listed right here. You would select that and say that that we want to process online payments as yes. If I say that online payment is yes and offline payment is no, this means that only people who register and pay online are actually going to be registered. You can't register and select any other option than to pay now if you have no as the offline option. If you have yes, this is going to give me as a registrant, I would have the choice to say I'm going to pay now or I'm going to pay by an offline method. When you have the offline method set to yes, I strongly encourage you to keep the section here set to yes as well, which is going to allow them to say, I'm going to register today. I'm not going to pay online today, but I can log back into my registration account anytime and make that payment online. So this way you are giving them the choice for at the time of registration, but you're also allowing them to come back later and pay that online. If you don't want them to pay offline, you want the, pay to play kind of thing, you can say no to this and only offline or online payment is going to be allowed. You as an administrator are going to have the ability to manually add registration data to a participant's profile. So you can create a person manually and add registration data. Then they would be able to go into their registration account and pay for it directly in there, as if they had done it online in the first place. If you do have any offline payment options, you should click here to insert offline payment instructions to add things like what the check should be made out to, or an email address for e-transfers, a physical address to mail something to, and that type of thing, just so that it's included for folks when they select that option so they know how they're going to provide their payment to you down the road. Because it's a demo site, I am saying yes to offline and no to online. So we'll save that and then move on to the last step of creating this form, which is the confirmation email. And this is, again, pretty straightforward. You want your registrar's name here. It can be your registrar's name. A lot of folks just put their organization's name in there. The registrar's email address is required as well. You do have to include the registrar's email address. The email that the registrant receives will be from this person, and if they reply to it, it will be going to this person. Almost every email that comes from Goalline comes from an email address that says do not reply at goalline.ca. I would just like for you to know that if people do reply to those messages, as they do sometimes, they will be replying to the email address in your website admin profile if you were the one that sent the email. So whoever was signed in and sent that email, their website admin profile email address is going to be the reply to. So we say do not reply to discourage people from actually replying to a mass communication, for example, but you will still receive those. When it comes to the registration confirmation, we just don't make it come from do not reply at goalline.ca. It's going to come from this and not from the website administrator who might have published the form. The options to include in your email are down the side here. You can include all kinds of different placeholder macros that would allow you to personalize the email. So instead of the default "thank you for your registration" and then the macro for registration data and receipt, you can personalize it and say something like "dear player first name" or "dear coach first name. Thank you for your registration. The season's going to start at this time. You can expect to hear from us. Here's your registration data and receipt." Um, the registration data is going to show them every single question that was asked on step one and every answer they provided. It will include questions that were optional, even if they didn't answer them, and it will just be blank if they didn't provide an answer. So it would include the "what are your allergies" question, just going back to our step one example, even if they didn't have any allergies, just to make sure that that information is all just perfectly laid out. The receipt information is going to provide their receipt information, like their transaction number and their payment information. If they did not pay at the time, it's going to show what they still owe. And it will also provide them with their access code so that if they don't already have access to their registration account, they would be able to access that. When it comes to individual registration, especially if you're not using shopping cart, I always recommend that you check this box here to show this confirmation email on the final page. When they've finished their payment and submitted their registration, by default, what will happen is the screen just kind of refreshes and it says your registration's been submitted, and you'll receive an email shortly. Showing this right on that confirmation page just looks a little bit more finished. It looks a little bit more complete. And I know that myself as a registrant, I always like to see some kind of acknowledgement of not just that it was submitted, but what did I submit? So it would actually show you the content of your confirmation email while it also sends it to you in your email. So I'm going to save my confirmation email, and I believe we have all of our requirements met here, so we shouldn't have any issues trying to preview or publish this form. I'm going to click the preview button. When I preview it, even if it was published, when I click the preview button, notice how the URL up here is indicating that it is a preview. So this is showing in test mode. I can still register and I can still pay. So the idea of using test mode is so that you can play with the form, proceed through the form, but you don't have to actually complete the steps. If you do complete the step, including payment, it counts as a registration towards this form. What I often see folks do is after you've created your form, gotten it ready for the season, using your executive or your board or your committee to just share the preview of the form and have those board members maybe register their kids or register themselves against that form before you make it available to the public, just to get out any kinks if there were any questions missing or questions that were hard to answer or program options that didn't work out for them. So just to make sure that you've got the ability to go through that. So test mode registrations do still count, but you don't have to actually proceed all the way through. Because we said on that first step that you can register if you're new or returning, now we have this returning question. Are you returning, yes or no? We're going to assume you are. And so we're asking first name, last name, date of birth, and access code. If you're not a returning coach, you would say, no, I'm not a returning coach. We are no longer asking for your access code, but we're going to ask you for all of the information that we don't have about you yet. When it comes to the allergy question here, we can see that if I say, no, I don't have any allergies, I can just move on. But if I say yes, now we have this new required question. And I actually do have an allergy, so I'll throw that right there. So I'm going to register myself. So let's see here. So Amanda. I'm not going to tell you my real date of birth. We'll just go with the usual here. So email address is required. Gender, I have to upload a file. So I am going to upload a file. Now, if I really wanted people to upload a file, I would probably have put a description to let people know what that was or what kind of file I expect. Emergency contact information, I'm just going to fill that in here too. And let's spell it a little differently. Okay. All right. So I'm going to save and move on to step 2. And this is where I'm going to be presented with the options that are available. So because I restricted the U7 Boys program to males, I can't register for that because I indicated on step 1 that I'm female. So I can only select this one because I didn't put any age restrictions. We're okay here. Um, oh, so my mandatory program was on the boys. So let's go back, and I'm gonna make a correction. That's what we'll call it. Required fields are missing. What did I do? Oh, sorry, folks. I got myself all in a tizzy here. Sorry about that. All right, what did I miss? Okay, I think I got everything there. Oh, and I didn't change the thing back, so I'm just going to leave it. So when I select this program, because this was not required as a mandatory program for girls, it was only required for boys, I can still check it. And if I check it, I have to select my option that my form has given me some issues here. I'm just going to make a selection there and hope that works. I may not have saved. Oh, goodness gracious. Apologies here. I don't normally have these kind of issues here. So I'm going to remove that. Age. There we go. Okay. I'll have to check on what's going on there. There you go. And we'll publish the form shortly here and go through there. So here, now that I've made my program and product selection, I now see the review and consent. So the review and consent is showing me, this is basically what's going to show up on my registration confirmation email. It's all the information that I provided, what was all the questions, what I'm registering for, and now I see the waiver and policy information. So I have to check the required check boxes, and I have to check, well, I don't have to check that I want email, but I am going to check that. And I agree to the terms above. So I think, let me just see here. Did I put it? Just typed it normal. Okay. So I got a consent using my name. And now here is my receipt. Because I can't pay online with my demo site, it's just a submit registration button here. So I'm going to submit that. So this registration went through. I had a bit of an issue with that product, so I'll go and kind of double check on the product. But now that we know that everything is kind of good to go here, I'm just going to go back to that product and change the mandatory option for this first of all. So I'll save that. Okay, there we go. All right, so now that's not mandatory. So now I want to publish the form. And as I do this, it's thinking through, do you have all the requirements met? And if I didn't, it was going to pop up and tell me you don't have all the requirements met. Now that it's published, if I click view form, it's going to show me the form, and it's not in the preview test mode anymore. This is live and available. The URL that shows up here is the URL for this form and only this form. So as you copy and archive and go into next year, this URL will no longer be the valid URL as soon as each form has its own unique URL and ID. So now this form would be published, and I'd be able to place it in my my menu. So how do I go and place it in my menu? So we're going to go to the website section here, and I'm going to click on standard menu settings. Goalline has all kinds of standard items that are part and parcel of just managing your sport organization. And so we give you all kinds of standard items that we know you'll need to place in your menu one way or another. And what we'll do is we'll select where we want to place it. So you'll notice that there is a top menu first row, second row, not displayed, or placed below a web page option for almost everything. There are some things that aren't able to go into a second row or under another sub page, but the registration forms can go anywhere. So we're going to put those in the top menu, second row. When I save that, It'll go through again a little bit of a menu check and make sure that that's okay. Now I'm going to refresh the public side over here and just go back to that home page. And here I see registration forms now because I just placed that in my menu. And here's my coach registration form. So I can share this URL or people can come and navigate directly to it. Now that we have a coach who's registered, I'm just going to show you quickly whether it was coaches or players or referees. You're going to go to the find person version of that person type. So if it was players, you would go to find player. In this case, I want to go to the view edit coaches, the coach search function. And I can search for coaches by name or all kinds of other criteria. But what I want to do is check who's registered. So I can see the registration form. Here's my form. Here are the program options available on that form. And I'm going to search. So I should see my one registration on on the screen. And we'll see when you have more programs and when you have more registrants, the summary information is very, very useful to have because you'll see a summary of your financial information. So far, there's been one registration by one registrant. They still owe you $100. And then here's the actual detail of that. And I have several export options. I can export the details, which is the list of actual coaches. I can export the summary as well, which is going to be this program breakdown. I can also customize the list of information so that instead of just seeing the information we see here in these columns, I can add other information and I could include things like those extra questions that we created on the form itself if I need to. I'm going to edit this by right clicking and saying open that in a new tab. I could just click on it and have it take over my tab, but I love lots of tabs. So now here's the registration record. And if I have a check from them or they sent me an e-transfer or some cash, I can click here now to record this payment. I can record the whole payment or a partial payment, indicate how they paid, and make a comment if I need to, and just record that payment. So now that registration is going to be considered paid in full. So that covers our registration webinar. So today we went over how you create, copy, and archive a registration form, how you make sure that you're collecting the personal information that you want, including adding extra questions, your program options when it comes to prices and product options, your policies and consent, very important to include that, but also important to know that you can just link to existing policy information, and then your email confirmation, which is a really important way for your registrants to know that the registration did properly go through, and just should provide them with some basic information about what they can expect now that they have registered. So that covers today's webinar. I think for the first time in a while, I actually made it in under the 60 minutes that I had scheduled. If there's any questions, I'll stay for a moment if you want to throw a question into the chat. But we also have a Goalline support team who's available for you Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live chat and phone during those hours. But you can email you can email the Goalline support team at goallinesupport@stacksports.com anytime. FAQ.goalline.ca is also a great resource along with our YouTube channel where this webinar will likely find itself within the next couple of days. So thanks so much for attending. And if you're watching this later on, having a coffee after work, thanks so much for joining us and spending an hour learning about Goalline's registration. So Beth, that's a great question. The question is whether you can add manual registration information for more than one program at a time. Unfortunately, no. And actually, while I have this coach profile open, I'm going to scroll down to the section where that manual addition would be. So the add registration info section, I'm going to make this a little bigger for us to see on the screen a little better. Add registration info. When I open this up, it's only going to show me what available programs are available on a form for this person type. So I only have one form available for coaches, and there's only two programs on it, but both of them are here. But because it's a drop down, I can only select one of them. So I can select this. I can open up any of those additional questions or products as well. I can indicate that they're paying me now, or maybe they're not paying me now and they need to pay later. Um, Registration comment, I would put in something like an in-office registration or whatever reason it is that you're doing this manual registration. You would also want to check the box to email them the registration receipt. This is essentially emailing them a copy of the registration confirmation, but without having any of the consent options because they didn't actually go through that consent process themselves. So when I save this change, let me just see what I selected there. Yeah. When I save this change, it's going to add that new registration record. So when the page refreshes, we're going to see the same profile here. And then I'll click back to the registration tab. And so it's going to show us now we have two registration records in here, the one that I already did and marked as paid and the new one. But I can just go down and do this again if I needed them to sign up for the other program as well. So the alternative is that we do allow you to import participants with registration information. You do have to have completed all of the steps that we just did with respect to creating the form. But with that, what you could do is in a spreadsheet, so long as you have the first name, last name, date of birth, and email, you can add the program and whatever amounts you've already received into that file. And if I was trying to register one coach for 4 programs, as long as they're all coach programs, I could just put that coach name 4 times in the file on 4 different rows with the different program each time being the unique difference. When I upload that document, I would be importing and updating the records of existing participants, and it would go through and it would say, okay, Amanda Vellatini is going in for program number 1, and then Amanda Vellatini is going in for program number 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. If you have a significant amount of registrations where you're trying to manually add multiple, if you're working from a spreadsheet, that might be the better way to go. If you're not sure how to do that, or if you haven't done that before, our Goalline support team is great at helping you configure and manage, make sure that your CSV file is formatted correctly. But remember, first name, last name, date of birth, email, always required, no matter whether they're brand new or existing people in your system. And then if you do want to add registration data to their profile, you need a column in that file called registration type. So yes and no. So if you had, when I came down here, is it exactly the same as going online? It should be. I mean, you should treat it that way. But technically, I kind of skipped the extra questions here. I went straight down to add registration info, and I didn't answer the extra question. If I scroll up, we're going to see that there are extra form questions for that coach registration form. So if someone didn't actually answer that yet, I would come up to the profile part and answer these questions as they go through. So I can make sure that all the information is there. But if I'm doing it manually, I would just make sure that I'm opening up those extra questions to answer those before I go and add the registration data and payment information. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So optional info. So you'll notice up here, when I go up, all of that information, everything that's a standard field on the individual registration form option with the radio buttons to set as required, collected, or not required, they're all here. Yes. So your height and your weight is up here. The positions, now you have to set. This is coach positions, so you can kind of create those on your own. But all of that, like your health card numbers, your address information, yeah, all of that is included in the profile. It's just a lot of folks don't use those kind of fields. More and more sports are starting to, for sure. But yeah, all of that is available here. If it's a standard field, it's going to be both in the profile and available to set on the form. So Baseball Canada number that we see here today, because the demo site that I'm using is a baseball site, Goalline just defaults to provide a field to represent your sport whatever number. So if we indicate that you are in Canada and your sport is baseball, it's going to say Baseball Canada number, but it doesn't have to say. We can update that on a per organization basis. So if you're not a baseball person, you don't have to have. It wouldn't say baseball. It would say whatever your sport is. If you're a multi-sport organization, we sometimes have we have a label. And the support team can update that label for you. And yeah, if you have a ton of manual entries, Beth, I certainly would recommend seeing if you can, if it's in a spreadsheet format already, it's probably really easy to use that. No, you can't get rid of the player profile field when you're on the admin side editing things. That is what's going to be there. You can't remove anything from the standard information that's part of a goal line profile. Awesome. Great questions, Beth. I haven't had a lot of folks asking questions at the end of my webinars for a while, so it's nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's tons of other webinars too, Beth, for you to take a look at, or anybody else who's watching here. Lots of other webinars. And I have done several registration webinars. So if you want to take a look at any of those, any of the other ones, but the Goal Line support team, if you have a lot of kind of if you're not even sure what kind of questions you have, I would give a call to our support team during our hours of operation so that you can just kind of pick somebody's brain. We have some fantastic guys on the Goal Line support team. Roberto and Jude are great. They know a ton about the platform and work really closely with all kinds of organizations, especially when it comes to registration. So definitely don't be shy. Reach out to the support team whenever you need to. So thanks so much for joining, guys. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you again in a couple more weeks with another training webinar topic to be determined. You'll receive an invitation soon. Have a great day, guys. Happy Halloween.